Hello, everybody. My name is Ernest Niño-Murcia, and I am a conference interpreter based in the US. I have created this video to show you Zoom's new AI interpretation function, which is currently in a beta testing cycle. In this video, we'll start by giving an overview of how to set up AI interpretation for your account. We'll get to see it in action, interpreting a speech from Spanish into English, and because I am a Spanish-English interpreter, I can give you an analysis of the issues that I noticed in the AI interpreter's rendition. We will then circle back to some basic logistics about AI interpretation on Zoom, and then we will close with some demos of AI interpreting from English into the other languages that are available. I actually came across this a bit by accident this morning because I was poking around my account wanting to do a video on human interpretation, the function that many of us know and love. And as I opened up my menu to click on the interpretation globe, I noticed something new next to it. This icon that is labeled voice translation, and we'll forgive them for using the incorrect terminology there, and has a little tag on it that says beta. So let's take a look at what we get and how we can set this up once we click on it. This is going to be our dashboard that we are going to configure our AI interpretation through. The top box that we select is my speaking language. I need to select the correct language so that anybody else in the meeting who wants to have AI interpretation of what I say has the correct source language. What I specifically mean here is that Zoom's AI function needs explicit guidance on what language is being spoken. It cannot detect your language, especially if you're not speaking English. Now, for me to be able to hear interpretation of other people in the meeting, I would select the language that I want to hear. And for our purposes here, we will select English for both. And I also want to note that for this to work, especially when somebody is not speaking English, on their end, they have to configure this correctly. Otherwise, this would not work. You see this scale that gives us a granular control of the proportion of volume between the original speaker and the interpreter. So basically, if you only want to hear the interpreter, you would turn the original to 0 or any proportion that was to your fancy. And we're able to even select from among two different AI voices. The first is Eric.
Gratitude is riches, complaint is poverty.
And the other voice that's available is a female voice named Lily.
I have never been hurt by anything I didn't say.
She's British, as you can hear. So without any further ado, let's give this a go.
Buenos días, buenas tardes, o más bien buenas noches, según el lugar donde se encuentren. Me dirijo a ustedes,
Good morning, good afternoon, or
estimados
rather,
colegas,
good night, depending
para
on where they
darles
are.
esta breve demostración de la función
I'm
de
writing to you,
interpretación simultánea por
my
IA
esteemed colleagues,
en
to give
Zoom.
you this brief demonstration of the
nueva
function of
función que
interpretation,
acabo de
simultaneous
descubrir
by
hoy.
and to and some,
Entré a mi
a new
cuenta
feature I
y
just discovered
estaba
today.
hurgando entre los iconos, buscando el icono que hemos
I
estado
logged into my
usando para
account and it was
interpretación y descubrí este
digging
nuevo
through the
icono
icons,
que
looking for the icon
decía
we have been
algo
using
como
for interpretation.
traducción de
And I
voz
discovered this new icon that
por
it said
IA
something like
o
voice
algo así.
translation
Y
for E or
específicamente
something
llevaba
like
la
that.
etiqueta beta.
And he specifically wore the
¿Qué
label
tal les parece?
beta.
¿Qué opinan de la actuación de esta voz virtual?
What do you think? What do you think about the performance of this virtual voice?
Let's now break down the AI interpreter's performance, comparing a transcript of the original with a transcript of the interpretation that was rendered by Zoom's AI function. We're going to actually look at this thematically. If you would like to analyze this yourself, go ahead and pause the recording and have a look. I've grouped some of the recurring mistakes thematically here and laid them out on a table where you see the original, the correct translation, and then AI's rendition. The first issue that I noticed was verb-object agreement. And so consistently throughout this little snippet where verb endings were being used that could correspond to one of two or several different pronouns, it is consistently making the wrong reads and using incorrect pronouns. This is something that a skilled interpreter is going to be able to very easily navigate from context, but LLMs are playing a statistical game and a numbers game, and not really thinking about context, which seems to be what we're seeing here. And so in the first example, you see that what should have been the second person plural, you, referring to my audience, was rendered as they. The second example is where I was talking about myself. It was rendered as it was, because strictly speaking, grammatically speaking, if you look at the words in a vacuum, that verb estaba can mean I was and it can mean it was. But we have to make choices as interpreters to figure out which of these is actually applicable to this situation. And the final example is referring to the icon, which honestly, by what would sound the best, you can omit the pronoun altogether. If you were going to use a pronoun, it would be it. Here it was rendered as he. Specifically, vocabulary-wise, we're now on the middle portion. AI, ironically, doesn't recognize its own name, because the first time that I mentioned AI, it really short-circuited and rendered it as which is this is going back 20 years to the bad old days of Google Translate, because literally the sounds of the letters I and A, which is AI in Spanish, are the word and to. But this is completely incoherent. I would say this is the biggest mistake that you see, where it says interpretation by AI on Zoom or AI interpretation on Zoom is rendered as interpretation by and to and some. That is completely incoherent. Likewise, where I refer to AI voice translation, and let me just say so that there is no confusion, the reason I am using that terminology, the reason I am talking about translation, is because that is how the icons are labeled on the platform. It seems to pick up on the sound and just say voice translation for E. That's bad. And we see some very basic grammar mistakes. This is something that a first-year English student is going to do, is calc the use of a conjunction from Spanish where English wouldn't use a conjunction. And so where it says la función de interpretación, it literally is the function of interpretation, but that is not natural fluid English. We would say the interpretation function. And likewise, where Spanish can use the de as a possessive, English would use an apostrophe S that you see in this last example. And so we're having some issues. I want to go back and look at one glaring mistake, and that is how at the very beginning I open the remarks by saying me dirijo a ustedes, which is a formal way of saying I am addressing you. Here, the AI completely fails to read the context and renders that as I am writing to you. Now, is this a phrase that is often used to open letters? Absolutely. But no live interpreter, short of suffering a major head injury before stepping into the booth, is going to render speech as I am writing to you. Now that we've seen Zoom's AI interpretation function in action, let's discuss some questions you may have. I'm drawing from the article published by Zoom about this function, and you can find a link to it in the description. AI interpretation on Zoom is currently available in English, Spanish, French, Japanese, and Chinese. That is likely to increase over time, but those are the languages that are available at the time of the current beta test. To be able to access this function, you need to have either a pro, a business, or an enterprise account. So the baseline is a paid account. You also need to be running the Zoom desktop client, which is to say the version of Zoom that you download onto a computer, and it needs to be at least version 7.0. Users who are eligible by these criteria have access to the feature for 5 hours a month for 2 months, totaling 10 hours. And the article goes on to say that the current projection is that AI interpretation would become a paid feature at the end of the beta period. As interpreters, what we don't know is how AI interpretation would be able to handle some of our daily occupational hazards, like bad audio from speakers online, speakers who have accents in their chosen language, and speakers with an imperfect grasp of the language they're speaking, but that grammatical or vocabulary irregularities can be a challenge. If you would like to see Zoom's AI interpretation go from English into these other languages, I will close this video with some raw demos of remarks delivered in English and then interpreted into Spanish, Chinese, Japanese, and French. I say that the demos are raw because there won't be any sort of analysis or breakdown, since I don't speak all of the languages in question, and we don't want this video to be an hour long. And so I leave that to you all. Enjoy.
This is a test of Zoom's new artificial intelligence or AI interpreting function. This is a new
Esta es
feature I
una prueba
recently
de la
discovered
nueva
and
versión
have
de
been
Zoom. La
testing.
inteligencia artificial, o
intentionally
IA,
attempting to
interpreta
speak
la función. Esta es una nueva
extemporaneously
función que
so that I
descubrí
can truly put this
recientemente y
function
que he
to the
estado
test
probando.
and see
Estoy
how well
intentando
it
hablar
holds up
intencionalmente
with
para
the
poder poner esta
sorts
función
of
realmente a
false
prueba y
starts,
ver qué tan bien funciona.
self-corrections, and random
Con los
pauses
tipos de
while
comienzos
a speaker
equivocados,
gathers their
autocorrecciones
thoughts that you are more likely to
y pausas
encounter
aleatorias
during
mientras un
extemporaneous
orador
speech
recopila sus
and not
pensamientos, con lo que
reading
era más
a
probable que
script.
te encontraras durante el discurso extemporáneo y
You can
no.
find a
Leer un
transcript
guión.
of these remarks in the description. I will
Puedes
then
encontrar una
attempt
transcripción de
to
estas
recreate
declaraciones
these
en la
remarks
descripción.
another 3 times so that they may be interpreted
Luego
into the
intentaré
other 3
recrear.
languages that are available in this feature. How well do you think it
Estas
did in your
observaciones se
language?
repiten
Please
3
let me know
veces
in the
para que puedan
comments.
ser interpretadas en los otros 3 idiomas disponibles en esta función. ¿Cuántos años crees que tenía en tu idioma? Por favor, háganmelo saber en los comentarios.
This is a test of Zoom's new artificial intelligence or AI interpreting function, a new feature I recently
这
discovered
是
and
对
have been
Zoom 新
testing.
人工智能功能的
I am
测试。
intentionally
智能或
attempting to
AI
speak
解释功能是我最近发
extemporaneously
现
so that I
并
can
一直
truly
在
put this
测试的
function
一
to the
项新
test
功
and
能
see。how well it
我故
holds
意
up
尝试 GNYC
against the sorts of
设
false starts,
以新发言
self-corrections,
听。
and random pauses to
这
gather the speaker's
要
thoughts
休息
that you
秋
are more
季
likely to
便
encounter in
一项
extemporaneous
我可以
speech
真正测试一
compared
下
to
这个
reading
功
from a
能，看看它的
script.
表现如何。
You can
反对
find
各
a
种虚假
transcript
的，
of these
会有开
remarks
始、
in the
自我
description.
纠正和随即停顿的现象。
I
一
will
边手
then
机说话者的
try
思
to
绪，与
recreate
阅读剧本
this
相比，
in
你
the
更有
other
可能遇到即
languages
兴演讲。
so that
您
it
可
may
以
be
在描述中
interpreted
找到这些
into
言论的
the
文
other
字记录，
languages that are
然后
available in
我
this
会尝
feature.
试在其中训练
How well do you think it did in your
其中
language?
中线这一点。
Please let me know
其
in
他
the
语言一
comments.
边可以将其解的是为此功能中可用的其他语言。你认为它在你的语言中能表现得多好？
This is a test of Zoom's new artificial intelligence or AI interpreting function, a new feature that I recently discovered and
これ
have
は
been
Zoom
testing.
の新しい人工
I
知
am
能のテスト
intentionally
です。
attempting
また
to
は
speak
EAI
extemporaneously
解
so that I
釈
can
機能
truly
とい
put
う
this feature to
最
the
近発
test
見したばか
and
り
see
の
how
新
well
機
it
能
holds
を
up
テストしてい
against
ま
the
す。
sorts
私
of
はこの
false
機能を
starts,
本格的にテストできるように
self-corrections,
意図的
and
に
random
屈強で
pauses to
話すことを
gather
試みていま
one's
す。そ
thoughts
してそれが
that
ど
you
れ
are
ほど
more
うまく
likely
耐えられる
to
かを確
encounter
認して
in
ください。戻っ
extemporaneous
たスタート
speech
や自己
and
修
not
正
when reading a
そして
script.
集まるためのランダムな休止
You
事
can
件な
find
ど
a
もあります。力
transcript
強
of
の
these
スピーチでよ
remarks
り
in the
頻繁に
description.
相互するような考えを
I will
表
then
現すること
attempt
です。
to
そして
recreate
脚本を読む
these
ときもそうではあり
remarks
ません。
another
これら
3
の発
times
言
so
の
that
記
they may
録
be
は
interpreted into the other 3 languages that are available in this feature.
説明文の中
How well do
内
you
に
think it did into
し
your
て
language?
確認できます。
Please
そ
let
の
me
後、
know in the
これらの
comments.
発言をさらに3回再現してみようと思います。この機能で利用可能な他の3つの言語に解釈できるように事件を設定します。それがあなたの言語にどれほどうまく汎用されていると思いますか？コメント欄でお知らせ。
This is a test of Zoom's new artificial intelligence or AI interpreting function, a new feature I
Il s'agit
recently
d'un
discovered
test du
and have
nouveau
been
service de
testing.
Zoom. L'intelligence
I am
artificielle, ou
intentionally
IA, interprète la
attempting to
fonction.
speak
Une nouvelle
extemporaneously
fonctionnalité que j'ai
so that I
récemment
can
découverte
truly
et que j'ai
put this
testée.
feature to
J'essaie
the test
intentionnellement de
and
parler de
see how
manière
well it
improvisée,
holds up
afin que je puisse
against the
vraiment
sorts
mettre
of
cette
false
fonctionnalité à
starts,
l'épreuve.
self-corrections, and random pauses to
Et
gather
voyez à
one's
quel point
thoughts
il résiste
that
bien
you're
aux
more likely to
contraintes, les faux
encounter in
départs,
extemporaneous
les
speech
autocorrections et les pauses
than
aléatoires
reading from a script.
pour rassembler ses pensées. Ils étaient
You can
plus
find a
susceptibles
transcript of these
et
remarks in the description.
pour le
We'll
susceptible
then attempt to recreate these remarks
rencontrer un
an
discours
additional 3
improvisé
times so that they may
fort
be
improvisé,
interpreted
plutôt que de lire un
into
script.
the
Vous
other
pouvez trouver une
languages that are
transcription de ces
available
remarques
in
dans la
this
description.
feature.
Je vais ensuite
How
tenter
well
de
do you
recréer
think it
ces
did into
remarques.
your
Un
language?
supplément de 3 fois est
Please let me
nécessaire pour
know
les
in
traduire
the
dans les autres
comments.
langues disponibles dans cette fonctionnalité. À quel point pensez-vous que cela a influencé votre langue? Veuillez me le faire savoir dans les commentaires.